Ladies and gents, this is the moment you've waited for.
Tropical Rouge Precure is the 18th season of Toei's long-running Pretty Cure franchise. This outing follows the adventures of Manatsu, Laura, Sango, Minori, and Asuka as they transform into magical warriors to stave off the forces of evil while also living their everyday school lives. It's a season all about motivation, believing in yourself, and supporting those around you, and doing what's most important in the moment. It's got a fun, dynamic cast, a solid emotional core, and no shortage of cool action throughout. And in this video, we're gonna dive deep into all of that and more, which is all gonna take a while, so I think that's enough preamble. What do you say we get right into it? This season was directed by Yutaka Tsuchida. This man got his start on Precure as an episode director and storyboarder way back in the Sweet days, and also directed the Kira Kira movie, so he's got experience. Outside of Precure, he's also got a handful of directing and storyboard credits across a handful of other, what I can only describe as miscellaneous shows. The most notable of which is called, and I promise I'm not making this up, Butt Detective. The director for this season of Precure worked on a show called Butt Detective. Butt Detective. Writing duties for this season were held by Masahiro Yokotani. This was his first foray into Precure. Not only was he head writer, but he penned scripts for roughly a third of the episodes. Beyond Precure, this man's got a whole host of writing credits, including as head writer for Aoashi, The Devil is a Part-Timer, Free, Makeine, Maria Holic, Rascal Does Not Dream, ReZero, Sakura Quest, Shimoneta, and more. Like, hot damn, this guy's been around. But if some of those credits raised some eyebrows, don't worry. He knows what Precure's all about. In an interview with Animaju magazine, Yokotani is quoted as saying, "I prefer strong girls who stand out over girls who live for princes." And yeah, that's the right attitude to approach writing this franchise with. This guy gets it. Character designs this season were handled by Yukiko Nakatani. She previously did the same for Go Princess and also worked as an animation director for 3 episodes this season, along with doing key animation for the OP. Credited as head producer this season is Aki Murase, who got her start in Precure as a production assistant on Hokuto before moving up the ranks, and we'll circle back to her much later. For now, the takeaway here is that this season was helmed by talented creators with oodles of experience both within and outside of Precure. Creators who got the appeal of the franchise and so sought to keep the ship steady. Did they succeed in that endeavor? Let's find out! Every season of Precure either lives or dies on how well it characterizes its core cast, so going forward, we're going to focus on one of them at a time. Starting with Manatsu Natsumi lives by a philosophy diametrically opposed to that of the villains, where the baddies are all about lazing around and not doing much of anything if they can help it. Manatsu is a veritable motivation singularity. She's all about living in the now, doing what's most important. All of that's made clear within mere minutes of meeting her. The cold open alone features her trying to cram way too much stuff into a suitcase set to some energetic animation, all of which acts as a sort of tone setter. You can expect Manatsu to bring this degree of reckless enthusiasm to everything that sparks her interest. And it's all capped off by her and her dad reciting to each other their motto. That right there acts as the thesis statement for both Manatsu herself and the season as a whole. Whenever that idea crops up again, I'll be sure to mention it, but for now, the rest of the first episode tracks Manatsu as she excitedly tours her new home, from the various sites in the city to the aquarium where her mom works. She immediately hits it off with Laura when they run into each other, them forming a great comedic duo. All of this she does with comparable levels of enthusiasm. There's nothing here that doesn't have her hyped up. Then, it's time to meet the season's baddies. Asphyxiated Mr. Krabs shows up and summons the weekly monster, calling it a Yaraneda, which my subtitles translate as don't wanna. A bit on the nose in either language, but hey, I'm not about to fault a kid's show for being straightforward in its messaging. Here we've got baddies yelling about wanting to be lazy and draining the Mob Psycho Body Improvement Club of its motivation. The messaging doesn't get more unambiguous than that. The main character who we've been following this whole time and set up to like has been been excited about doing all the things, and guys signposted as being evil are all about making people not do things. The narrative as a whole, then, is touting the virtue of passion. Motivation is the key to success, and finding things that excite you can help drive you to being your best self. Case in point, Manatsu is excited by the prospect of saving her new friend Laura and the Body Improvement Club, and her motivation helps her to become her best self. That is, a cure. So, based on this first episode, what motivates Manatsu? Everything, as it comes up. When she sees the aquarium, that becomes the most important thing in the moment, and so excites her. When she sees Laura in danger, that becomes the most important thing in the moment, and so she gets motivated to rush in and save the day. In other words, she's living her life exactly as she said she would in the opening scene, doing what she thinks is the most important thing right this moment. Through her, the narrative puts forth the virtues of passion and motivation as essential for being your best self, for living your best life. And all of that's just from the first episode alone. Those ideas will be further reinforced in numerous adventures to come. But before we can track how Manatsu evolves over the course of the season, we must first discuss the other avenues by which the narrative characterizes her. A fleshed-out, three-dimensional character is more than just a list of goals and traits. The most human characters always have their little quirks and hobbies, their likes and dislikes. How then does the narrative characterize Manatsu beyond being the season's thematic center? Let's examine some smaller bits of her characterization to find out. In the early outings, Manatsu is handicapped by a severe case of tunnel vision. Episode 2 shows her too absorbed with her present dream of living her best middle school life to really understand and take into consideration Laura's needs. This manifests comically at first, with Manatsu walking out on Laura while she's in the middle of talking, which causes Laura to instinctively say bye before realizing what just happened. But later on in that same episode, Manatsu's tunnel vision and Laura's own worries and preoccupations clash, leading to their first fight, the first real speed bump in their friendship. And it's only by putting aside her own present obsession and seeing things from Laura's point of view that Manatsu is able to, albeit only temporarily, overcome her tunnel vision and make up with Laura. Manatsu's still doing what's most important to her in the moment, it's just that her priorities have shifted from an old dream to a new dynamic. While she's able to work past her tunnel vision when she tries, that's still an intrinsic part of her character that never fully leaves her, as shown much later in episode 35. This episode shows Manatsu's tunnel vision making her preemptively leap into action while everyone else is telling her to wait, which just causes things to get even more screwed up. In other words, her tunnel vision spurred her to haste, and to fix her mistakes, she has to slow down, think things through, and broaden her view. That penchant for hyperfixation will always be with her, but thanks to her friends, by the end of this episode, Manatsu learns how to account for that part of herself, and in so doing, becomes a more thoughtful hero. But wait, that's not all. Beyond her bad habit of getting tunnel vision, thanks to her near-constant state of excitement, she's the most hard-on-her-sleeve character in this whole affair. If she likes something, you're going to know about it. She likes your story? She's gonna gush about it. She likes those fish? She's gonna press her face up to the glass about it.
Concerning.
She wants to start her tropical club with the rest of the cures? She's going to bother the student council president about it until she acquiesces. You've never got to wonder what this girl is thinking because she's got no qualms about saying exactly what's on her mind. All of this shows that Manatsu is, first and foremost, earnest. Functionally, that makes her an effective protagonist for a children's cartoon, as whenever she has to learn a lesson, you can be certain she's going to take it to heart and in so doing model it for the kids watching. But it also, in general, serves to make her endearing. Sure, we all love nuance, but let's not forget that there's power in simplicity. It's refreshing to be able to look at a character and know beyond a shadow of a doubt that they just say what they mean. It helps, funnily enough, keep everything grounded. Because we can always trust that Manatsu's going to be straightforward and earnest about everything, the rest of the cast is afforded some breathing room. They can get more complicated because we've always got Manatsu as a shining beacon to fall back upon. Whenever things get tough, you can always rely on her to be by your side, supporting you and bringing out your best self. That's probably the most important thing about her. Manatsu is, surprisingly enough, a reliable, dependable comrade who wants her pals and, most notably, even strangers to be their best selves. This is best shown in episode 19 where, as a result of some haunted mansion hijinks, Manatsu is tricked into believing that this doll is haunted, when really it's just one of the baddies hiding under the table. They start regularly meeting and, thanks to Manatsu being Manatsu, strike up a somewhat genuine rapport. Manatsu never learns the truth about the doll actually just being the kid, but the kid never forgets the kindness she was shown, as symbolized by her keeping the doll as a memento for the rest of the show. Their interactions, based on false pretenses though they were, brought out a better person in this otherwise petulant villain. And thanks to that, the kid actually ends up lending the cures an assist, saving Manatsu's ass at the start of episode 44. Like they say, what goes around comes around. None of that is to say Manatsu's perfect. Her earnestness sometimes manifests as a complete lack of awareness of others' privacy. Manatsu, don't just grab people's tails without permission, what are you doing? But still, when the going gets tough, you can always count on her to try to do what she believes is the right thing. Between all of that, the little details that paint the portrait of Manatsu Natsumi show her to be more than just the energetic protagonist. She's earnest to a fault, wears her heart on her sleeve, and is ever so reliable. And naturally, the Manatsu at the end of the season is a more mature person than the version of herself from the start. There's the whole thing about correcting for her tunnel vision, of course, but there's also something slightly more complicated that comes up right toward the end. Remember, in the earlier episodes, Manatsu had to learn to see past her own immediate desires and prioritize the needs of others. But it's not as simple as think of others before yourself. Your own feelings matter just as much, and it's okay to prioritize them when they really matter to you. That last lesson is something only made apparent in the very last episode. For context, across the finale arc, which carries through the last 5 episodes, Manatsu and Laura have been living with a sort of Damocles hanging over their heads. In episode 37, they learned that the law of the Mermaid Kingdom is that any mermaid who meets with humans must have their memories of that encounter erased, which also erases memories of them from the humans they encountered. Episode 42, the start of the finale arc, shows both Manatsu and Laura worrying about what'll happen, so that can be a little ball of anxiety growing in the pits of their stomachs, while they're also busy fighting the baddies. Here, have some anxiety as a treat. The end of episode 45 throws another wrench into things by giving Laura a choice. Either come back home and have everyone's memories erased, or stay with her friends and become human permanently, never to return home. And Manatsu overhears that offer, which means that Laura's choice, the fact that she has an option, is hanging over her until it's time for Laura to decide. Now, from what we've learned about Manatsu, you might expect her to slap Laura on the back and be like, "Cheer up, love. Whatever you decide, you'll always have my support. And I'll become Tracer in the meantime." She's always been about supporting her comrades and learned hard lessons about putting others' needs before her own, so it would make perfect sense if she did just that again. Except she doesn't. Instead, she breaks down sobbing, begging Laura to stay. And I'm not ashamed to admit, that got me crying too. In this moment, 2 things matter most to Manatsu: her need to hang on to Laura, and Laura's need to leave. And while the latter ultimately wins, that conflict was there long enough to tear her heart in 2. It is selfish of her, yes, to ask Laura to give up her lifelong dream just to stay with her, but so what? It's okay to be selfish sometimes. After all, you can't take care of others if you can't first take care of yourself. This isn't Manatsu regressing, it's the narrative telling all the kids watching that they're not wrong for having and expressing their own needs. Manatsu doesn't force Laura to stay, but she can't let her leave without making sure she knows how much she'll be missed. And that, finally, paints the complete picture of Manatsu Natsumi, an energetic girl who gets so excited about her passions that she develops tunnel vision and has to learn to focus, a kind heart who always seeks to prop up her friends, and underneath all of that, a kid who has a hard time letting go of the things that matter most to her. Manatsu never fails to live by what's most important to her in the moment. Often it's her friends, but sometimes it has to be, and it's okay that it is, herself. Before we talk about the girl who breaks Manatsu's heart, though, I want to first delve into some of the real-world history behind her people. In Tropical Rouge, mermaids are benevolent creatures, but throughout human history, they've generally been portrayed as a bit more, shall we say, mischievous than that. Murderous, even. Some of the earliest legends in human history about mermaids date back to about 1000 BC, where, in Assyrian mythology, the goddess Atargatis, I hope I said that right, threw herself into a lake out of shame or grief after, to put it bluntly, fucking her lover to death. Quoting from a blog post on the subject, her beauty is such that she cannot die nor be fully transformed into a fish, and so she retains her feminine shape and beauty above the waist, while having a fishtail instead of legs. From there, the Greeks took that legend and ran with it, spinning Atargatis off into Aphrodite and or Amphitrite, and following from them the Tritons, who are themselves mermen and maids descended from her and Triton, and the Sirens, part human creatures who were usually depicted as women luring men to their deaths with their songs. They famously appeared in Book 12 of the Odyssey, where Odysseus had to tie himself to the mast of his ship as he sailed by them to resist their song. These initial sirens may have initially been portrayed as more bird-like, but later in history were more commonly portrayed as mermaids, starting with the Romans. From there, legends about mermaids spread all throughout the world. There's, and I'm definitely not saying this right, Yirorokidul in Javanese mythology, the Queen of the Southern Sea. There's legends about the seductive, deadly Rusalki in Slavic folklore. Even Brazil has its own myths about Iara, who tries to lure men to live with her underwater with her song. Throughout all of these legends, a few notable commonalities persist. Mermaids have the upper torso of a woman and the lower body of a fish. They have beautiful, alluring voices, often used to lure men to their watery graves. Occasionally, they'll be portrayed as benevolent, but more often than not, you're better off putting in earplugs if you're gonna risk talking to them. Japan even has its own mermaid legend, which resulted in a rather well-known hoax. The Japanese legend of the Ningyo is about a human-fish hybrid. Notably, though historically the Ningyo is gender non-specific, that's the same term used to identify Laura and her people in Tropical Rouge. Ningyo! The earliest legends of Ningyo date back to about 8th century AD, and more commonly featured a monkey-like upper half. From the 17th through the 19th centuries, Ningyo became fixtures of animal hoax attractions at Japanese sideshows and carnivals, where the top half of a monkey would be sewn onto a fish. These hoaxes, likely known as such in their homeland, were elsewhere dubbed Fiji mermaids. In 1822, some sucker called Samuel Barrett Edds just about bankrupted himself purchasing one such mermaid. Cue some monetary and legal shenanigans, it winds up in a museum, which then lends it out to notable showman, conman, and racist P.T. Barnum, played here in the film The Greatest Showman by Hugh Jackman.
So tell me, do you wanna go?
Barnum concocted a scheme to put the mermaid on display and sell it to the public as an authentic specimen of a real-life mermaid. And because he was such a showman, he went on tour with it across the South, his various displays drawing hordes of crowds. This, assumedly, made the man a pretty penny and solidified his career as a showman. Because of that early success, he was able to expand into other businesses later in life, such as a traveling circus in 1870. His exploits were such that his influence is still felt in the general entertainment industry today. What I'm saying is you can draw a direct line from a funny little monkey fish in 8th century Japan to Hugh Jackman yelling at you, "History is wild, y'all." And that exact hoax is actually something Tropical Rouge brushes up against in episode 4, to which Laura naturally responds, Hey, can you blame her? Laura's mermaidness is much divorced from the Japanese legends of the Ningyo. Rather, her character draws from the classical notion of mermaids that traces back to the Greeks, with the upper body of a girl and the lower body of a fish, and a beautiful voice beyond compare. However, this is a kid's show, so naturally they differ in terms of goals. Like that one Javanese figure, she aims to be queen, but where the classical mermaid wants to drown you, if Laura kills you, it's not going to be intentional. She's just going to overwhelm you with her personality until you drown in it. Laura is the face of this season, and for good reason. She's got a lot of them, so she can easily spare one. She's so powerful that she achieved meme status and invaded my feeds years in advance. Come on, you know what I'm talking about. I know you've seen them.
It's that too. Gotta make the people think that they want them. Really want them. Really fucking want them. Hit them like Bronson.
If you haven't, go watch that in its entirety. It's great. That's our iconic fish queen right there.
And you sell seashells on the seashore.
So yeah, getting the obvious out of the way first, Laura's iconic because she's just so darn extra, both in personality and in animation. Despite her personality, which we'll get to in a moment, she's immediately endearing just for how expressive she is. The animators went all out into making her a visually fun character, and their work paid off in spades. And don't get me wrong, that work does not run in contrast to the personality established by the script. Rather, the script and animation perfectly complement each other. At the start of the show, Laura is characterized primarily by her ambition and ego. The animation, with faces like this, and this, help to sell that characterization, but thanks to that variety of expressions, the tone is kept light. The animation helps portray Laura as amusing instead of grating. The script itself is focused on her being self-obsessed and singularly focused on her goal of becoming queen. When the queen is briefing her on the dire situation their kingdom faces and Laura's tasked to seek out the cures to help restore it, she seems at best petulant at the prospect of having to interact with humans. But of course, she instantly perks up at later, when she has her first encounter with Manatsu, the only thing that excites her about the meeting is the prospect that she can use Manatsu to become queen. Then, as soon as it seems like Manatsu isn't one of the cures and is therefore of no use, Laura immediately ditches her, and probably would never have given her a second thought if Manatsu didn't rush back to her side later in the episode and end up transforming. All of that shows that, at the start of her journey, Laura is predominantly selfish. She's primarily motivated by what will benefit her, and only cares about others insofar as she can use them to further her own agenda. And with how much she loves showing herself off, she basically starts the show as a lighthearted P.T. Barnum. She thus stands in stark contrast to the rest of the cast, who all, in their own ways, seek to help others. Luckily for her, that same cast serves as the catalyst by which Laura starts her journey from self-obsessed royalty to loyal comrade who's just as eager to prop up her friends as she is to prop up herself. That journey, though, is a gradual one. Its first steps are taken in episode 2, where her and Manatsu's conflicting priorities end up forming a rift between the two of them. With Manatsu being the one to step up and mend that rift, her bravery, her leading by example, is what first sparks a change in attitude in Laura. She wasn't going to be the one to step up and apologize, and Manatsu being the one who does, demonstrating herself to be the more thoughtful, mature, and brave of the two, can't help but humble the self-important Laura just a tad. After all, if she's all that, shouldn't she have been the one who stepped up, showed herself to be more mature? This realization of hers is never outright stated but clearly signposted by her dialogue, where she whispers an apology but is too embarrassed to say it any louder. From that dialogue alone, we can tell she's getting self-conscious. She wants to do better, but can't admit her own part in their earlier fallout. She's got her pride to maintain after all, so that'll have to be chipped away at in the episodes to come. Still, this is an important first step on her journey to becoming a more thoughtful friend. Across Laura's journey to maturity, lots of little tidbits flesh her out into a more three-dimensional character. There are some things that play into her egotistical bend, like her penchant for melting at compliments, as seen by her getting all smug when Sango calls her cute in episode 3. Then there's her absolute confidence in her own knowledge and abilities. She always assumes she knows everything, even when she doesn't, and completely breaks down when she's proven wrong. This crops up in episode 23, with her being certain that she'll dominate the swim club, only to be horrified to realize that she has no idea how to swim with legs. And in episode 24, with her being 100% certain she knows the answer to a trivia question, only to fall into a mud pit for her hubris. She's also hyper-motivated to maintain the image she projects as a confident, competent leader, and will do anything to protect that image. That comes into play in episode 33, in which the weekly monster has a secret of hers written on its back, and she's so alarmed at the prospect of anyone reading it that she actually solos the thing. And beyond reinforcing Laura's self-obsession, her act of soloing it actually kind of justifies her ego, her hyper-inflated sense of self-importance, because as far as I can recall, no cure in an ensemble season has ever actually been allowed to just solo the weekly monster. So the fact that she does really sells her as being far more powerful than I think the show intended. So yeah, Laura's somewhat justified egocentrism sprouts off into overconfidence and arrogance and volatile reactions, all of which are very on brand and endlessly amusing thanks to the animation working overtime to make it such. But what else? who is Laura beyond that? For one, Laura is the rare Kyor who finds motivation in righteous anger. Her very first transformation in episode 17 is unlocked only when she sees Manatsu floating helpless and beat up, having just got her shit kicked in, and upon seeing that, Laura gets fucking pissed. I don't know about you, but I think if Laura ever glared at me with that much fury, I would be instantly evaporated. This trend continues in the very next episode, where the monster interrupts just as Laura was about to, as she imagines, prove herself in front of a whole crowd to be a super awesome wonderkind, and so once again gets fucking pissed right as she goes to transform. This is thus a habit for her. Laura has a temper. What's important here though is that her anger generally isn't directed at her friends. Instead, when she gets angry, she channels that anger into doing something productive like assisting her comrades and beating up monsters. Through this, the show demonstrates to all the kids watching that you're not always wrong for feeling angry. Anger is a natural human emotion, and while you shouldn't let yourself be controlled by it, Laura's use of it shows that, when targeted with pinpoint precision, it can be a highly effective motivator. It's also important to realize that Laura's never out to hurt anyone. While she does have a temper and an inflated sense of self-importance, she's not the kind of person who would accomplish her goals by stomping over someone else. One episode that clearly illustrates this is 20, the Not a Murder Mystery episode. Manatsu's super special bread has gone missing, and the girls quickly determine that the culprit must be Among Us. So hijinks ensue where everyone has wild accusations thrown their way, intragroup tensions are skyrocketing, and then, toward the end, Laura realizes on her own, oh, shit, wait a minute, I'm the bad guy. And upon this realization, she immediately confesses and apologizes. If nothing else, Laura does hold herself to a high standard. She wants to reach for the stars, yes, but not if that means climbing over those she cares about to do it. When the situation calls for it, she will humble herself, because before she can feel good about herself, she has to make sure she's in her friends' good graces. In fact, the more time she spends with them, the more she mellows out. Thanks to her Freaky Friday incident with Minori in episode 15, she's extra keyed into how that quiet girl might be feeling, such that in episode 28, it's her, rather than Manatsu or Sango, who worries about Minori, about whether she misses her old club and her writing. In other words, Laura's able to develop a stronger sense of empathy thanks to actually walking a mile in another's shoes. The last bit of noteworthy extra characterization for Laura is that she loves to sing. First, this is pulling from the historical portrayals of mermaids as always having illustrious voices, in turn leading to comedic hijinks where the girls freak out that Laura might be trying to kill them.
少しだけ聞いたことあるよ。大丈夫だった？魂抜かれなかった？そういう意味じゃないし。
But that aside, part of her love to sing plays into her need to be in the spotlight, from trying to show off for the camera during the TV competition episode to engaging in over-the-top acting during their rehearsals for the club play. At the end of episode 13, she does broadcast her singing for the whole school to hear, and sings again in the last episode in front of the whole school during the play. Yes, Laura will always love the attention, but we must further note that singing is also something she does for herself. When it's first brought up in episode 13, she's initially reluctant to make a spectacle out of it.
ローラ、ちょっと歌ってみて。やだ、お断りよ。人魚の歌は見せ物じゃないわ。
This shows that, beyond being the self-important mermaid with a prideful streak, Laura does have things she values simply for their own sake. Her own little indulgences that bring her joy outside of the context of the rest of her life. It's little details like those that take Laura from just a personality and goal to a fully realized character with hobbies, likes, and dislikes. In other words, with three-dimensional characterization. And now, all that's left is showing how Laura grows beyond the kid-friendly P.T. Barnum into a more empathetic soul. So, at the start of the show, Laura is self-centered and arrogant, prioritizing her goal of becoming queen above all else. Over the course of the show, thanks to the influence of her friends, she slowly starts to appreciate and prioritize the needs of others while never losing that self-centered edge. In the end, does she demonstrate herself to be a changed, more mature person? The latest, clearest example comes during the finale arc. In episode 43, knowing the truth about how the big bad got to the state she's in, when Laura and the rest go to confront her, instead of immediately going into combat mode, Laura tries to talk to her.
後回しの魔女、思い出しなさい。あなたは。
The Laura from the start, hell, Even the midway point would not have done this. Remember, Laura's initial transformation was triggered by her being fucking pissed at the pain and misery the baddies were causing. That Laura would have started throwing punches without a second's hesitation. This Laura, though, has had time to grow. She's had time to walk in other shoes and empathize with their hardships. This Laura isn't out to use people to accomplish her goal any longer. While her base goal hasn't changed, the nature of it has. She's not out to be queen to be fawned over. She's going to be a great, benevolent queen loved by her people, not just because she's the best for the job, which she obviously is, but because she does right by them. And that starts with trying to help even the people who've hurt her the most. Laura may be self-important, arrogant, a little too full of herself, but when push comes to shove, thanks to the influence of her friends, she is, ultimately, an empathetic leader, someone who's able to see through a person's mask and so do right by them. She's an ambitious, prideful girl, and also someone who learns to understand and act on the needs of those around her. She's someone who can take private pride in her talents and heritage while also rarely missing an opportunity to flaunt herself. Arrogant and kind, prideful and uplifting, a character who grows into an aspirational leader while still retaining her unique individuality. Through it all, she is, to quote a man whose character was assassinated so hard he ceased to have any other lines, my queen.
You are my queen. You are my queen. I don't know what else I can say.
You can say.
Before we move on to the rest of the crew, we must first discuss how, out of everyone, Manatsu and Laura have the most fleshed out dynamic. Indeed, their relationship is the heart of this season. Most Precure seasons have either two leads whose dynamic carries everything, or an ensemble where everyone gets along pretty well without a singular super fleshed out relationship. But Tropical Rouge tries to do both, a fleshed out dynamic between its two main leads supported by the rest of the ensemble. The last time Precure tried such an approach was, I want to say, Happiness Charge, maybe arguably Star Twinkle. In any case, I, for one, am glad they gave it another go, as they pulled it off pretty darn well here. All of the season's most emotionally affecting moments are centered on these two. The second episode doesn't even get around to introducing the second cure. Instead, it's focused on further developing Manatsu and Laura's relationship, through them working through an argument and coming out the other end more closely aligned. Episode 3 and beyond show Laura being all tsundere about how much she just wants to hang out with Manatsu. Don't play hard to get, Laura. She's never gonna notice if you're not honest. She's too straightforward for that. One of the first times we see Laura super motivated to do anything other than pursue her own goals is in episode 10. When Manatsu has her motivation drained and Laura frantically rushes around trying to reclaim it. The very next episode sees Manatsu pick up on Laura feeling left out without her saying anything, and so she goes out of her way to start planning how to include Laura in future club activities. They get comfortable enough with each other that when Laura gets her legs, her moving in with Manatsu isn't even a conversation, it's just what happens. But then, of course, there's that pesky choice Laura has to make in the end, to either stay with Manatsu and the rest of their friends or go back home and have everyone forget everything. For all that she's grown, Laura can't give up on her dream, and so has to leave after a bittersweet goodbye. Manatsu swears they'll never forget. But they do, as overnight, all mementos of their time together fade away, and so life goes on, their time together but a distant dream.
It's everything you ever want. It's everything you ever need.
Except hang on, that doesn't sound quite right, does it? Just a few episodes earlier, we learned that they had in fact met once before as little kids and already had their memories wiped. And not too long after, they happen upon each other again. At some point, that ceases being coincidence, right? At that point, it starts seeming like they're destined for each other. Old traditions are telling them they can't be together, but their bond is more powerful than old outdated norms, so fuck them. They literally blow up the memory wiping machine, destroy the physical manifestation of that worthless old tradition, and so are able to come together again. On the one hand, this can be read as a simple message of don't let traditions dictate how you live your life. They only have value if they bring you meaning, and if they would hold you back, that's how you know it's time to discard them. But by that same token, I promise I did not go into this season looking for this, but I mean, two girls defying old values simply because they want to stay together, literally blowing up traditions to keep each other? I mean... Sango Suzumura's story is, in general, about how a lack of self-confidence can turn into paralysis, indecisiveness. The first episode to center her, episode 3, shows how at first she's totally unable to go against the grain. Although she demonstrates herself to be instinctually kind and self-sacrificing, as shown by her giving away her own ice cream and returning a dropped wallet, when her friend group starts shit-talking mermaids, instead of correcting them, for at this point she's already befriended Laura, Sango shuts down and meekly goes along with them. She fears standing out and thus isolating herself because that already happened to her once before. She was the nail that got hammered down, and the thought of facing that pain again is paralyzing. Thankfully, her new friend Laura is there to smack some sense into her. After a lecture from her about having some self-confidence and seeing Manatsu and Laura in danger, Sango finally musters up the courage to talk back to her friends before rushing off and being granted her transformation. So her first outing overall communicates a message about courage and individuality. You should never go along with what other people say or do simply for the sake of fitting in. When your friends are doing or saying something you know is wrong, it's okay to call them out for it. And if they're your real friends, your differences will only strengthen your bond. Sango comes out of her first real outing with a newfound courage, but that underlying indecisiveness still lingers. It'll take until the end of the season to resolve that. Until then, the season's content to explore a lot of little details to flesh her out into a more complete person. Sango is no contest the most empathetic member of the Tropical Club, and for evidence of that you need look no further than episode 9, where she uses what she's learned about self-confidence and courage to help inspire a struggling actor in finding her own courage. Sango's also, bar none, the best at relating to and working with kids when the club shadows a teacher at a preschool for a day in episode 14. Between all of that, Sango demonstrates a unique ability to see the best in others and help them bring out the best in themselves. That's important, remember that. Sango's also got a bit of an understated goofy side, with episode 21 having her show up for the Tropical Club's summer camp, struggling with all of her luggage, which is, per her own admission, just a fuck ton of makeup. Look how delighted she is, how could you ever say no to that face? Episode 24 shows her excited enough about the prospect of being on TV that she butts in on Asuka's interview segment. Also, buff Sango is real and she can and will hurt you. Between all of that, Sango is shown to be a kind, empathetic, low-key goof with a love for makeup and bringing out the best in others, but she's still got underlying self-confidence issues to resolve. And all of that's going to come to a head in episode 39. This one opens with Sango regarding all of her friends with envy. They've all got clear goals in mind for the future, and though she wants the same, she just doesn't know what to do with herself. So, in pursuit of that goal, the goal of finding a goal, she decides to audition for a modeling contest, one of the judges for which is that same actor she once helped inspire. She doesn't necessarily know for certain that modeling is what she wants to do with her life, but it sparked her interest, and Life with Manatsu has helped her develop the self-confidence and desire to pursue what she likes for her own sake. And so, Sango, more confident now than ever, puts her all into putting her best self forward for the audition, and then glows up so hard that her fellow contestant breaks down in tears like, Jesus Christ, Sango, I think you're too powerful. But wait, we know who Sango is, right? She is, first and foremost, empathetic, with a penchant for bringing out the best in people, as previously demonstrated in episodes 9 and 14. So, is it any wonder that, rather than leave this woman to her fate, she volunteers to do her makeup for her? And then hers, and hers, and hers as well? Sango could have easily left them all alone and won, but instead, she chooses to help uplift her supposed competition. Sango has always loved makeup and helping others. Now, thanks to pursuing one related interest, she's finally realized that her passion lies not in that, but in the combination of the things she already loves doing. So when it comes time to choose between finishing her audition and running off to help her teammates fight the weekly monster, it's not really a choice at all. She was only ever going to do one thing. Sango is always, every time, going to choose to help others, whether that's models with their makeup or her friends with their magic monster fights. That's who she's always been, and all it took for her to realize that about herself and to love that part of herself was for her to take a chance on herself, to pursue a new interest even if she didn't know where it would lead. So that's Sango Suzumura, the empathetic makeup artist who always puts others first. Her story shows that there is value in uplifting others, while simultaneously showing that it's okay to stick up for your beliefs and put yourself forward. And if putting yourself forward means uplifting others, all the power to you. Don't be afraid to pursue what interests you. You never know to what unexpected delights that pursuit will lead. Minori Ichinose and Komachi from Yes 5 are the same character. No, I will not be taking questions at this time. Oh my god, how do I still remember the name of a character from 13 seasons ago? How much of my brain has been partitioned off just to make room for all these magical girls? What is wrong with me? Okay, admittedly, yes, that is a superficial comparison. Both are quiet characters who take up writing as a hobby and struggle to have confidence in their work, a struggle to which I personally relate deeply. But beyond that, Minori's got plenty going on to make her stand tall on her own. Well, stand short of straight, at least you know what I mean. Our introduction to Minori in episode 4 sees her in tortured artist mode. Manatsu reads a story Minori wrote during her time at the school's literature club and loves it so much that she goes up to Minori and starts gushing about it, which, to her, entails excitedly recounting every detail of the plot. PSA, if you ever read a story and fall in love with it, do not go up to the author and just recount its plot to them. They will cringe so hard that they will start slowly shrinking and transforming into a corncob. In the face of that, Minori naturally feels compelled to raise her voice to say, "Yamete!" It's worth noting that this is one of very few instances in the show outside of the transformation sequences or battles where Minori is anything other than soft-spoken. That she deigned to raise her voice now, of all times, drives home just how deeply embarrassed she's become by her own work. We get flashes of what caused this. There's no dialogue, but the visuals are enough to convey that she was devastated after getting some harsh criticism. And speaking from personal experience, I get it. Dedicating so much time and energy and thought into your work only to have someone write it off or tear it down. Whether or not that criticism is valid or in good faith, if you're not ready for it, it can absolutely crush you. Suddenly, with just a few of the wrong words at the wrong time, everything you've ever made is garbage and you can't stand to look at it anymore. Why did you even bother in the first place? No one's gonna like this shit anyway, you're better off leaving it all behind. By the end of the episode, she's regained some spark of joy in her life, thanks to Laura rekindling her belief in and fondness for the fantastical, but that lack of self-confidence, that inability to believe in her own art, still lingers, and will haunt her for much of the rest of the season. In the meantime, though, she proves herself to be more than just a tortured artist. In episode 8, for instance, thanks to Manatsu sampling her lunch, we learned that she apparently just does not have taste buds. She'll just eat any old nasty thing, so long as it's healthy, without batting an eye. Honestly, a bit of a superpower right there. Girl's got guts. She's also a bit of a comedy sniper. She's absolutely the last person in the world you'd expect to be cracking jokes, so when she does slide a quip in there, it's all the better for how unexpected the source is.
人魚だけに
You just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just...
Your mileage may vary, but honestly, I love that for her. And let's not forget the time she and Laura got Freaky Friday'd, as a result of which she discovered a newfound appreciation for the life she leads after being forced out of it for a day. We also learned that her neutral face is her excited face, which is very on brand.
ローラ、私がローラの分まで頑張る。あら、みのりにしては珍しくやる気があるじゃない。え？私はいつだってやる気あるけど。
She's also, delightfully, a huge dork. Episode 20 shows her getting all hyped to get into the role of a detective when a mystery crops up that only she can solve, and then she's really bad at it, making wild leaps in logic at every given opportunity. She may be book smart, yes, but there's a difference between intelligence and wisdom. So even the quote-unquote smart character is out here showing us that not everyone knows everything. You're not going to be good at something just because you're enthusiastic about it, and learning is a lifelong process. Maybe she'll get there one day, but she's going to need a lot more practice before she can start calling herself Sherlock. All of that is to say that throughout the course of the show, beyond the archetype of tortured artist, this season illustrates Minori as a quietly determined, witty dork who really shouldn't be let anywhere near a kitchen. But underneath all of that, we've still got her inability to believe in her own creativity to contend with, reinforced in the Freaky Friday episode, where she's super embarrassed when Laura discovers her writing, and in episode 28, where Laura's still wondering about whether Minori misses writing. That same episode later provides verbal confirmation of what was already hinted at, that some harsh criticism from a senpai killed Minori's drive to write. That one ends with her reassuring her friends that she's all better now, but it's notable that she's still not writing again. Maybe she believes her own reassurances, but they are, ultimately, a mask, as all of her insecurities come right back into the forefront in episode 40. In this outing, the Tropical Club's continuing its planning for the senior graduation party, and they've settled on putting on a play. But who's gonna write it? The resident writer, right? Manatsu excitedly suggests adapting Minori's story, but Minori's old insecurities bubble to the surface. And while she doesn't outright say no, neither does she give her explicit approval.
少し考えさせて。
Clearly, she's still haunted by those old criticisms to the point where she still can't bring herself to believe in her own writing. But after all she's already experienced, what could possibly still be done to help her regain her confidence? This is the question the other girls are left pondering. And as a bit of an aside, I do absolutely love that this pondering leads Sango to saying this.
でも、みのりん先輩が書きたくないなら、無理強いはできないよ。
This is something Precure has struggled with in the past, where the intent of the narrative is that one of the characters is struggling with some pursuit of theirs and the others try to help her along, but without the others actually sitting down with the struggler and asking what they want or need, it comes off as the others pressuring the struggler into doing what they think she wants, which is brushing up against some icky peer pressure dynamics that you really don't want kids internalizing. It's thus super cool that this episode actually takes that into consideration. The whole journey this episode becomes about the characters trying to inspire Minori and help her regain her confidence, rather than just telling her that she should do it until she gives in. So anyway, they go on their inspiration trip, during which it's revealed that Minori, who wrote into her old story magic papayas as MacGuffins, much to her mortification, despite having done plenty of research into it, has never actually tasted a papaya. So they all sit down to have some together, and it's this moment where everything finally comes together for Minori. In the language of flowers, papaya means companion, and boy, she's sure got plenty of those, hasn't she? Friends who never stopped believing in her, who went all out to help inspire her without ever pressuring her to do anything. Their belief helps her to finally once again believe in herself, and it's in them that she finds new inspiration. Not for her old writing, but for a new story, one drawn from all of their own unique experiences. She's finally ready and willing to write that play, adapting not her old story, but the story of the Tropical Club, because in the moment, that's what matters most to her. Overall then, Minori's story communicates two things. When you're an artist, criticism is inevitable. Put your work out there and eventually, no matter how good it is or how much you worked on it, someone is going to shit on it. No matter how much praise your art gets, when someone's got something nasty to say, even if their voice is just one out of thousands, that voice will drown out all of the rest if you let it. When that happens, you have to be ready for it. If you're truly passionate about your art, you can't let that one voice win. You have to make the choice to push past it, to instead listen to the voices of those who actually matter, those who care about you, and those for whom your work actually resonates. Do that, and your creative impulse will never be snuffed out. Eat some papayas with your friends, and learn to love your art just as much for the process of making it as the end result. Minori does just that, and in so doing finds a renewed self-confidence and, importantly, new inspiration. That's the other thing. Inspiration can come from anywhere. The stories you read, the adventures you have, even the friends you make. This isn't write what you know. This is write what excites you. That will always make for the most compelling work. The work that could only ever come from you. Go where your creative impulses take you, and even if the end result is messy, the work will be uniquely yours. And for that, it will be beautiful. To what I imagine is no one's surprise, my favorite character from this season is the red-headed tennis loner herself, Asuka Takizawa. She enters the show an absolute badass, making fools of a group of street thugs without breaking a sweat. But that's not what's most important about her introduction, though it is, of course, very cool. Manatsu and Laura are both immediately smitten, and I'm like, yeah dude, same. Rather, what's most important here is what happens just after. In a franchise all about the values of friendship, teamwork, and cooperation, when Manatsu and Laura ask her to join their team, Asuka says no. She's got a lone wolf thing going on, and that's an aspect of her character that persists even when she finally does join the squad by the end of the episode. Despite her repeated rejections of Manatsu's invitations to join the team, she's always standing up for Manatsu's group, in the face of both thugs and an old friend with a stick up her ass. When she finally joins the group, it's not because anyone asks her to. It's because she sees what the right thing to do in the moment is and decides for herself that she wants to do that. In other words, every choice Asuka makes, from helping the group to becoming a cure, needs to be her own. She won't do something just because someone asked her to or told her that she should. What's important to her is being able to make her own determinations about what's right and wrong, and being free to act on her own will. And what I find most significant here is that the narrative never frames her rugged individualism as a flaw that needs to be punished or corrected. Rather, her deciding to step up and become a cure entirely on her own terms is framed as the morally correct action when she's rewarded with her own transformation. So, what's up with that? What's up with the teamwork-centric Precure franchise up and deciding, you know what, this lone wolf sort of attitude is also cool? While it's true that over the course of the show she warms up to the whole teamwork thing, the fact that she was allowed to start off like this, as completely and unapologetically individualistic, and never judged or demeaned for it, helps send a message that acting in your own self-interest and pursuing what you believe is right for no other reason than you feel like it isn't inherently a bad thing. Everyone's their own unique individual, and everyone has the right to act and present themselves as they see fit. In other words, you are not wrong for being you. Having the courage to be your own person is, in fact, something to be celebrated. That doesn't mean you should never strive to get along with others, just that it's okay to prioritize yourself, to be yourself. This is a thread that carries through her whole arc, for even at the end, when she's fully a part of the team and is happy to have her friends cheering her on, when she goes to confront Yuriko, the girl thanks to whom she became a lone wolf to begin with, she does it all on her own, and chooses to let go on her own. This isn't something her teammates can lend a hand with, and even if they could, she'd turn them down. Her beef with Yuriko is hers alone to resolve. All of that's to say, while the show as a whole is very much rah-rah teamwork, Asuka being allowed to retain some semblance of her lone wolf approach even at the climax of her arc shows that there is still power and value in fighting your own battles. It's not wrong to want to do something yourself. Simply one path of many you should leave yourself open to. Of course, Asuka's got a lot more going on than just being a lone wolf. Across the rest of her screen time, we learn lots of little tidbits that flesh her out into a more three-dimensional character. In episode 8, for instance, we learn that she's the family cook as part of a chore-splitting scheme with her dad and brothers, showing that she's got a strong commitment to family and is maybe not as averse to the whole teamwork thing as she likes to project. Episode 6 shows that she's a casual gamer, revealing that she's got a small yet very real dork side. Episodes 9 and 24 show that she's camera shy, revealing a more self-conscious interior usually masked by her confident, cool exterior. She's also a bit more quick-witted than you would expect from the jock. She takes charge in her first fight in episode 5 to coordinate an attack that none of the others figured out, not even the book-smart Minori. But probably her best thinking on her feet moment comes in episode 31, where one of the baddies tries to start shit early in the middle of Asuka's class's train vacation, so at a stop, Asuka suggests taking this outside, then quickly hops back on board as the train gets moving, leaving the baddie stranded. Between all of those moments and more, Asuka's shown to be more than just the cool loner. She's a quick-witted, justice-seeking leader with a bit of a dorky side who's always determined to do what matters to her. But of course, across the season's runtime, Asuka grows beyond her commitment to just being a cool lone wolf. While she never loses her cool exterior and ends up just as capable, if not more so, of handling shit on her own, see that frantic screaming sprint she does when racing against Yuriko in episode 24, she nevertheless slowly comes to once again value teamwork and camaraderie. At first, this manifests in small ways, like how in episode 10 she's the first to jump in to back up Manatsu in a fight while the other two hang back. She's not about to let her comrade go it alone. Or how about in episode 11, where, when the group are trying to decide what sand sculpture to make and Manatsu proposes something with this absolutely hideous drawing, Asuka quietly, without being asked, redraws it to help flesh out Manatsu's idea. Actions like these show that while she's never going to go out and cheer rah-rah teamwork, she's still willing to step up and help out where she can. Oh, and let's not forget episode 12, where the president of the school disciplinary committee, thinking she's some sort of cop, decides to start beef with the Tropical Club for no reason, and in response, in her most based moment, acting with the righteous fury of the most stalwart comrade on the planet, Asuka gets up in the girl's face and actually says, "All cops are bad." So okay, in at first subtle ways and then gradually more explicit, Asuka demonstrates a growing acceptance of and commitment to teamwork. But before she can accept it fully, she's got a blood feud to resolve. The first half of the show makes it clear that Student Council President Yuriko has got something to do with Asuka's aversion to teamwork. Indeed, their feud is so powerful that whenever they glare at each other, that Fist of the North Star sound plays. You heard that, right? That's the same sound.
お前はもう死んでいる。何?
I promise I didn't add that. I'm not crazy. That's the same bloody sound. What's it doing there? So yeah, they've got beef. And it turns out that said beef once broke Asuka, made her go all lone wolf. Episode 30 reveals that they used to be comrades, an unstoppable tennis duo. But then episode 31 shows how Asuka felt betrayed by Yuriko for forfeiting a match of theirs after Asuka flew off the handle at another pair. From Asuka's perspective, she was just standing up for her partner, only for said partner to stab her in the back as thanks. It's no wonder she abandons the idea of teammates wholesale like that. What's the use in them if they're just gonna betray you after everything you do for them? Of course, thanks to Manatsu et al., she comes to learn, nay, remember, what teammates are all about. And it's that remembrance which finally lets her think things through enough to start to see things from Yuriko's point of view, to try out a little empathy. Over the course of their tennis showdown in episode 38, the stakes of which are a recommendation to the school they've both been dreaming of attending, Asuka's learned enough to let Yuriko tell her side of the story, and with that comes the revelation that of course Yuriko didn't betray her. She did what she did to try to protect Asuka, to keep their team together. In other words, the both of them only ever acted in the other's interest.
あなたとずっとテニスしたかった。
They only ever did what they thought a good, supportive partner would do. It's just that their ideas of what makes a good partner, what makes an effective teammate, didn't necessarily line up. They were too caught up in what they thought the other wanted, not what they needed. Thanks to hashing it out with Yuriko over the duel, and thanks to all the lessons in teamwork and empathy she's learned over the course of the season, Asuka's able to come to that realization and then demonstrates her newfound compassion by abandoning the match. In so doing, she throws away her shot at getting that recommendation, but that's not what's most important in the moment. Her teammates need her more than she needs it. And if she stayed to finish her match with Yuriko, she'd be making the same mistake she did as when she stormed out on her oh so long ago, prioritizing her own needs while failing to recognize those of the ones who matter most to her. But Asuka's matured since then, so of course she doesn't repeat it. Instead, she chooses the needs of her teammates over her own desires, proving to Yuriko and herself that she's grown into a more reliable teammate than ever. In so doing, the narrative shows that what makes a strong teammate isn't just someone who's good at doing the sport. Rather, it's someone who recognizes the strengths, weaknesses, and needs of their comrades and moves to support and complement them as needed. By the end of the show, Asuka has grown into just such a person, and thanks to that, her heated beef with Yuriko is finally able to cool and be rekindled into something warmer. And once they realize how much they've always been willing to sacrifice for each other, I give them 3 weeks before they move in together and a year before the wedding bells ring. The action scenes in this season are a bit of a roller coaster in terms of quality. Sometimes they're extremely well animated and hella hype for it. Sometimes they're clever in terms of environment or strategy, turning the fights themselves into problems or puzzles that the characters have to use their wits to get through. And other times, perhaps a bit too often, the fights are just sorta there? Obligatory things to get through before we get back to the actual story. Let's go through a few examples of each. There's not too much to say about that first category, fights that look cool, as their appeal is self-evident. If it looks pretty, we're having a good time. The season naturally opens and closes on some well-animated action set pieces, with other cool bits in episodes 2, 22, and more. The season's most notable bits of action animation, though, come courtesy of episode 29, which gets the action started early and maintains the excitement for the bulk of the runtime. That episode in general is a highlight of the season, with incredible scene direction and action animation littered throughout. Quick shout out to episode director Yuta Tanaka, who was also series director for Go Princess, animation director Keisuke Mori, and everyone else who worked on this episode. It was a real treat. I mean, this cannot be understated.
Holy shit.
Then we have the episodes where maybe the animation's not doing all the work, but the scene construction is such that the fight still makes for a compelling watch. Fights are made into puzzles, or they make clever use of the environment, or something like that. Look at episode 21, for example. In this bout, just as the squad is about to head out on vacation, Manatsu's luggage gets monsterified, that's a word. This makes for some light comedic bits about all the unnecessary garbage she ended up packing, but more importantly, the trunk being open means they can't just punch it into submission. They've got to be a bit more clever than that. They've got to figure out what makes this monster unique and respond accordingly. Only then can they finish it off with their weekly attack. And in this case, since it's an open trunk that keeps throwing Manatsu's garbage at them, the solution is, of course, to lock it shut. And so we've got a fight that is in some minor way more a test of wit than raw strength. It engages the viewer not through pure adrenaline, but through continual surprise, employing its gimmick to throw a variety of smaller challenges at the Cures before making them think through how to shut it down. For another example, the fight in episode 11 is notable for making clever use of the environment. The rest of the episode was about the club hosting a sand sculpture contest on the beach. The monster interrupts and traps Asuka and Minori in this spinning jump rope thing, and in order to free them, Manatsu hits upon the idea of applying what they've been doing the whole time, building sand sculptures. They take a bunch of sand and water and build around it, in so doing trapping it and freeing the other two. And so this fight wasn't about punching the thing to death. It was about employing wits and applying the knowledge they've gained to overcome an obstacle in a unique manner enabled by their unique environment. Those episodes and more all show that a good fight's not just about Sakuga. It's about creating bespoke encounters tailored to their respective episodes, made unique for their environment or monster gimmicks, forcing the characters to think things through instead of just charging in. Ideally, of course, an episode should deliver that and sick animation at the same time, but hey, on a franchise with as tight a production schedule as this, not everything's gonna look amazing, so sometimes you gotta take what you can. On that same token though, given that strict schedule and the sheer quantity of episodes being forced through that pipeline on a yearly basis, not every fight's gonna be a banger. Some of them are, inevitably, going to wind up stinkers, often feeling little more than obligatory. At the end of the day, these shows are subservient to their formula, and there are occasions where they really shouldn't be. Like, take a look at episode 26. The episode as a whole is about the Tropical Club helping out this one girl who's trying to start up her own astronomy club. She talks about some shooting stars being space debris.
A whole trash.
A whole trash on the ground.
And the club decides to help her set up a meteor shower viewing event to drum up interest in her club. Turns out, advertising is hard, as they learn when they're forced to pull out crazy gimmicks just to get people to attend. But through hard work and determination, they do end up attracting a sizable crowd the night of, showing that being passionate about your interests is never a waste of time. Whether or not people take interest is secondary to the pursuit, but pursue it hard enough and passionately enough, and you'll almost inevitably draw attention. So spread your passions to the world, dear children. After all, the more who have their eyes on the stars, the more chances we will all, as a whole, have to learn about them. Oh, and then also a monster shows up? Yeah, so the monster fight in this episode really has nothing to do thematically with the rest of the episode. It just happens because this is an episode of Precure, and we're obligated to fight a monster every week. I mean, at least it takes the form of a telescope, so it's visually on point, but aside from that, it just feels like a random interruption which the girls have to shoo away before we can get back to wrapping up the actual story. And that sort of narrative structure, where the fight feels disconnected from the rest of the episode, thus weakening the whole, crops up enough throughout the season, like in episodes 32 and 40, that it does drag down the season. Not too much, but enough that I had to mention it. So overall, the action in this season was a bit of a roller coaster. At the best of times, the action is some of the best this franchise has to offer. At the worst, it comes off as fluff. There just for the sake of it. But as a whole, I'd argue that this season's successes in this area generally outweigh the stumbles. If you can sit through those mistakes, Tropical Rouge does have plenty of excitement to offer. There's a handful of things that bugged me this season. I'll try to focus on the larger overarching things here. First, Sango and Minori's personal arcs are so similar to the point of feeling redundant. Both are soft-spoken girls with little to no confidence in their own artistic endeavors, and it's through their time spent with the rest of the cast that they're able to find their sparks again. Did you notice how the Sango section was the shortest of the individual character sections earlier in the video? I was really stretching to find ways to distinguish her from Minori. Yes, there's plenty of little details separating the two, like Sango being a bit more willing to put herself out there, while Minori prefers to work behind the scenes, but still. When their arcs are so similar that you can use the exact same sentence to accurately summarize them both, I'm left wanting, wishing that one of them had a more unique character arc to help set them apart. Sango, for instance, is introduced as an instinctually helpful girl. What if her arc had been about her learning to rein herself in when she overextended, whether through pushing herself too hard or intruding where she wasn't wanted? Yeah, I'm just spitballing here, but the point is I just wished there was more to help set her and Minori apart. Speaking of Sango, episode 32 features her learning a lesson in teamwork, which she didn't really need. This episode features that classic lack of confidence rearing its ugly head when Sango gets recruited for a modeling gig. Initially, she's too nervous to walk down the runway, but then gets inspired when she sees the rest of the models and the crew banding together to get the show ready. Teamwork makes the dream work and all, but Sango's been a part of a team for nearly 30 episodes now. So the lesson being taught here falls flat because it's one that Sango should by all rights already know. Between that being a contender for worst episode of the season and in general not having much else to do, what I'm trying to say is, of the whole cast, Sango got the shortest end of the stick. But she's not the only one with dud outings. I already talked about episode 26 for its fight being disconnected from the plot, but from that synopsis, did you know it was supposed to be an Asuka episode? Her dad shows up in everything, beating his drums to scare away clouds. This could have been a great opportunity to flesh out Asuka's family dynamics, which are only hinted at elsewhere, but instead they only exchange a single line of dialogue, such that her dad's inclusion feels random. A real throw spaghetti at the wall episode, that one. So with that and a few more I don't feel like delving into, it's safe to say that everyone gets at least one stinker this season. But no contest, Sango got it worst. Lastly, there was a recurring narrative construction wherein one of the girls would be torn between pursuing their present personal goal and abandoning it in order to help their friends do the weekly monster fight. Laura abandons her speech in the student council elections to join a monster fight in episode 30, Asuka abandons her tennis match with Yuriko to join a monster fight in episode 38, and Sango bails on her modeling audition to join a monster fight in episode 39. While these all do play into the larger theme of focusing on what's most important in the moment, at some point, each of these characters facing the exact same choice and making the exact same decision starts to feel repetitive, leaving me begging the show to please try telling a different story, any at all. Last and least, I've got a handful of miscellaneous points to go over that I couldn't figure out how to integrate gracefully into the rest of the video. First, this season marked a franchise first, with a whole episode, 33, dedicated to a series of shorts. These shorts came with a variety of animation styles and were fun for their sheer novelty. But what this episode will probably be most remembered for is the cameo appearances of the Heartcatch cast, and I gotta say, I think they could have handled that better. As is, the Heartcatch cast get a handful of lines after the episode already spends nearly a full minute playing their transformation sequences for no real narrative purpose, giving the impression that their inclusion was more about padding for time than doing anything actually new and meaningful. Their actual screen time with new dialogue accounts for less than 2 minutes of the episode's runtime. If the production was going to go through the effort of bringing back the old cast anyway, why not go whole hog with it and dedicate a longer segment to actually doing something with them? What I'm saying is I miss my Heartcatch girls and I want more of them, okay? And I'll tell you what, wish for something long enough and you just might get it, because imagine my surprise when I booted up this season's movie and got just that. This generation of the franchise is a bit of a departure in that instead of 2 movies, where one is just about the season's core cast and the other is a whole big crossover with a bunch of other cures, we just get 1 movie, which is mostly about this season's cast, which is to say Laura, while also giving a single other crossover cast, the Heartcatch crew, significant supporting roles. And thank God they're here, because otherwise this movie would be fairly unremarkable. Laura and Erica immediately clashing thanks to their matching personalities like 2 magnets with matching polarities was a darn fun time. The rest of the movie exists, and I feel no need to linger on it. Next, I found it funny that the makeup-centric season happened to be set in the most makeup-hostile environment of any season. Not saying it's not viable, just when you're in a setting as humid as that of Tropical Rouge, it takes extra careful hard work to make sure you're doing it right such that it's not melting off your face in the face of all the humidity. Which I guess says something about never giving up and putting in hard work to achieve your goals even in the face of adversity. It most definitely wasn't a thoughtless creative choice. Producer Aki Murase directly addressed it in the same interview with Animaju from earlier, stating, "When they use makeup, it's not for a prince. In other words, it's only for themselves. Makeup this season isn't something mandatory for making yourself pretty, it's just a cool extra that boosts your strength and confidence." And all of that is something I can easily get behind. It's also notable that this season doesn't have a traditional fairy companion, the cute little fellas that grant the girls their powers. Instead, Laura fills that role for the first half of the season before getting her own transformation, and the actual fairy who comes in, Kururun, doesn't have much of anything to do with the magic stuff, and just sort of hangs out and is cute. I like to view this as the season being just slightly economic in its storytelling. Instead of hiring voice actors and writing dialogue for main characters who won't even participate in the action, by simply folding that element into the action, the script is able to spend more time fleshing out the characters who actually matter. So yeah, I think that's neat.
Kururun is love, Kururun is life, all will genuflect before the almighty Kururun.
The villains this season were fine, perfectly functional, and a little more. They serve as a solid thematic foil to Manatsu's crew and not much else. The crab and the dog are mostly just there. The kid is usually grating, but does at least have that one tenuous connection with Manatsu, which was neat. The butler being the secret final boss was fine, nothing terribly surprising there, nothing terribly offensive either. Most significantly though, the witch's procrastination being born from her not wanting to fight her first and only friend in Onett is kinda... I gotta be honest, I'm not sure how to feel about that. On the one hand, it's unexpectedly sweet, lending the big bad some much-needed emotional depth. On the other hand, I'm not sure it's entirely thematically on point. The whole season has been about motivation being power. The Cures are motivated to accomplish their individual goals and to band together to save the day from monsters, and as such, always prevail. In contrast, the baddies, by being lazy and lacking motivation, always fail. However, in this particular scenario, the big bad herself used laziness as an excuse to not do evil. In other words, by procrastinating, she saved the world from her own malice. Her lack of motivation saved the day? Kind of? So that can be read as, in certain situations, procrastination can actually be beneficial? Which, I don't know, man. Maybe I'm misreading it. It just seemed off to me. Feel free to tell me how I'm wrong in the comments. Next, this season's soundtrack was generally neat. The music was composed by Shiho Terada, who previously worked on Healin' Good and has a whole bunch of other miscellaneous credits across the anime sphere. Her work this season was a good match for the tropical vibes, and while I feel no need to spend paragraphs extolling the virtues of this season's music, I do at least want to spend a few seconds highlighting some standout tracks. First up, the track Tropica Shine with Everyone functions as Manatsu's theme. It incorporates both electric guitars to relay Manatsu's energy and bells to convey that tropical theme. Next is Laura's theme, a deep sea legend. I love the mystical mood it conveys. And you've gotta love the irony of those quiet, mystical vocals being used to represent the boisterous Laura. Next is the transformation theme, which is exactly as exciting as it should be. And I love in particular the strings, or is that light woodwind? That start up after a few seconds. The last bit I'll highlight is this theme that plays during the weekly attacks. It's hard to say no to that electric guitar, and once again, excellent use of other string instruments there. Electric guitars with something from the violin family is a combination that'll never get old. Again, though, these are just a handful of examples. There's a lot more to like in the soundtrack, so hats off to Tarada for the excellent work. Lastly, there's this bit in the finale where the girls are knocked down and they've got to get their motivation back, so they pep talk each other and raise up in a glorious burst of light, shouting, but I suffer from internet meme brain rot, so naturally, as soon as I saw that, my mind immediately went to... So that all, finally, is Tropical Rouge Precure. Overall, yeah, I'd say that's a pretty darn solid season of Precure. A lovable, dynamic cast with a resonant emotional core, a solid thematic foundation of motivation and doing what's most important in the moment, and no shortage of exciting action. This season had its share of low points, but taken as a whole, Tropical Rouge is a worthy entry in the Precure canon. When I think about this season, I'm going to remember it for Asuka being a cool loner, for Laura being a gremlin, for episode 29, but mostly, I'm going to remember it as the story of two girls whom the world tried to tear apart, but who cared about each other so much that they blew up tradition to stay together anyway. It's everything you ever want. It's everything you ever need. Thanks for sitting through my return to ramblings about a children's magical cartoon show. If you want to keep listening to my voice, this year alone I've uploaded 3 other feature-length videos focused on anime, so why not give those a watch? Next up is another seasonal anime video. I hope you'll stay tuned for that.